Good evening and welcome to Tinkering with Edkelar. In the previous part, we took apart and started to clean this early 1970s radio receiver. Now, the conclusion. And like I said, the label remover does work well with that old glue too. Made it relatively easy to pull off the mesh from the front panel. Much easier to clean and also giving the mesh a quick polish. New glue for the mesh. And random heavy things to get it flat again. And potentiometer cleanup time. These feel scary scratchy. I don't even want to know how they work electrically. Pretty easy models though. The cover tin holds everything together. Clean. Lubricate. Assemble. And repeat for all four of them. Also giving the two power transistors a dab of thermal paste. Since the switches won't come apart, I'll have to clean around them. Also a dab of grease. Now these sliding switches are special. You can see here that they are double-sided and have different patterns on either side. So there is exactly one way these need to go back together again. I made sure of that by only ever removing one at a time. Also, turns out they are much easier to insert from the other side. They have a pointy end that slides in easier. It didn't seem like it, but there is enough room on the PCB for that. And the tuning capacitor. Always interesting to see how many different ways these can be constructed. So similar, yet so different. Removing old grease and some hidden ball bearings. Careful not to bend any of the fins. That might lead to extreme adjustment sessions. Putting it back together was, well, interesting. The biggest problem was that one wiper in the middle. It needs to make contact to the axle, so I can't bend it too far. The next challenge is the anti-backlash gear. It's two half gears that can rotate against each other, held in constant tension with a spring. And of course, the end stop was in the wrong position. So, once more. Trying to straighten out the antennas. I don't want them to snap off, so I'm leaving well enough alone here. The bottommost switch is an on-off style one. It's for the AM antenna selection and the only part that comes off here. The buttons clean up nicely. The switch bank itself doesn't come apart, but the spring and lever assembly underneath does. Connecting the two parts again was the next level up. Aside from one button coming off, we need to get the spring-loaded levers in the right position before connecting the two, all at the same time. Like with the keys in the VT110, it worked best when putting the springs on after the fact. Now, the backdrop for the indicators was very much discolored. I hated it. So I went to our nearest office supply store and got a few binders. One was too thin, the other too transparent. But making a sandwich from both gave me just the right material. Adding the holes for the springs. And say it springs. Looking pretty snazzy, and it allows light to shine through. The FM tuner gets a good clean and lubrication job. No electrolytics in that one. Looks good. Assembly time. The speaker is first. If the screws don't want to come out, just use more power tools. Removing the stuck screws is so much easier with a good pair of pliers. Cutting the new screws to length. And the base. The lower ball bearings had metal inlays. Yep, rotates reasonably well again. The base plate had chrome edges, but the battery has tarnished those. I got sticky silver foil as a replacement, but darn, just a smidge too short in one direction. While it seems to stick reasonably well, I had to reinforce it with glue on the inner edge. It would always come off from there. The trim capacitor is the first thing I need to add to the chassis. It is mounted with some rubber bumpers, which have held up pretty good. Finding the correct screws also turned out harder than usual. There are at least two types that are the same diameter, but have a different pitch. And several lengths of both. Why? I am aiming for the tuning string to go on as a first milestone. So all related components need to go on now. The meter isn't really part of the tuning mechanism, but it is smack in the middle of it. So, putting it in so I only have to tighten the screws later. It took a few times to get the strings correct. The service manual shows how it is supposed to run, but I miscounted the turns around the driving capstan. And finally, all good. Now the other string. Here I had a bit of a hard time getting the tracking on the drum correct. You can see that it is basically a thread which winds and unwinds the string in a controlled fashion. If you don't get the string started in the right groove, it jumps or might even detach. Next stop, the upper part of the chassis. I like to have the top cover on as soon as possible to avoid any accidents with the tuning strings. Most of the screw connections have large gaps for adjustment. And time to follow the wiring diagram. I'm pretty sure I put the wires in slightly different than the original, but the connections are where they should be. Tiny screws, eyelet on stiff wire, washer, and just enough room for one finger to get there. Take two. I decided to give myself an early feeling of accomplishment by mounting the light bulb first. Mounting the button bar. And there was a bit of deteriorated felt between the scale and the transparent cover. I glued one in place again. Making sure that the indicators are able to cover the range of the scale. Connecting the side panel with the external antenna input again. Also, for some reason, a DC filter cap between ground and battery positive. And even more wiring. To avoid breaking off any wires, I'm putting on the side panel, at least hand tight for now. And attaching the receiver PCB. Note that I had to fish out the little push levers before tightening it down. This one wire with the ferrite on it is the supply wire for the FM receiver. It is tight. I thought it might have been because I cut it, but it turns out that it already has been rubbed through almost completely by the chassis, adding a piece of heat shrink. And clipping the levers into the switch blades again. And after connecting the final bits of loose wires and only the antennas left to go, a quick power on test. Woohoo! I got a station! Adding the ferrite antenna. And rerouting one of the ground connections, just so that it won't get caught up in the capacitor. The service manual says that the front can be hinged up and down without removing the buttons, but they interfere quite dramatically. The lowercase part is next. I tried to glue the broken pegs, but it wouldn't be strong enough. I'll add a large washer instead. And the FM antennas. Reconnecting the speaker. I put the wires on the same connectors, but the speaker is upside down, so left-right arrangement for the colors is now reversed. The front panel had a few plastic pegs. These keep the loop antenna from hitting the grounded metal. One was broken. I designed a quick replacement in OpenSCAD, and to keep the sides symmetrical, I removed the good one too. Oh, turns out that the gray part in the battery box is actually also part of this. It holds the center part of the antenna and also provides the indicator for the azimuth ring. Now, time to align that thing. I could not find any way to make that look even remotely interesting. Punch in numbers to the frequency generator, twiddle a knob until the signal is where it should be. Repeat. Here's the page from the service manual. A table full of footnotes. Took me the better part of a day to get all of these things aligned again. Especially troublesome is the IF alignment for the FM part. I had to revert to doing that by ear. Why? You see, this is the 1960s. Back then, a spectrum analyzer wasn't really a common tool. So instead, to get the filter and decoder parts aligned within the frequency domain, they used a scope in XY mode. The frequency sweep, 200 kHz for this one, was controlled by a sawtooth waveform as a modulation input to the frequency generator. And then you can take the input sweep in one direction on your scope and see the output of a filter in the other axis to check for the quality of the filter. And the manual assumes that all of this is common knowledge and equipment. I did come across a setup like this before when I fixed the precision tube scope. It mentions something to that extent in the manual, but lacking the proper frequency generator, I could never test it. Modern digital scopes aren't good in XY mode to begin with, and I don't have a good generator for the modulation anyhow. So, back to the twiddle until it works mode. I'll revisit that part when I get the appropriate setup going. For now, it does at least work, and the indicator shows the correctly tuned frequency. Now that everything is in tune, I put on the front panel again. And yes, it fits. But the hinge part does not clear the buttons at all. The black vinyl cover comes loose in parts. I'm gluing it back down again, since there seems to be nothing missing at least. that weird brown stuff that seemed to be leftover residue from the batteries, it resisted most scrubbing and cleaning attempts. But during the fixing of the vinyl, I discovered Scotch tape. Stick it over that stuff, and when you peel it off again, it takes that gunk with it, as one sheet. Woohoo! And cutting new rubber feet from a stick-on sheet. The base will not work without these. And adding the battery contacts again. I hope they last for a bit. Let me know in the comments if you have any affordable source for replacement springs. Now, why does the receiver have an azimuth ring on the base? As this is a world receiver, it did come equipped for travel. You know, when you are out on your yacht and lost your bearing over a few glasses of champagne. And GPS was not a thing back then. So, you can use the internal ferrite antenna, which has directional characteristic, and turn the radio until you lose reception. At that point, the receiver points towards the transmitter. And by repeating that with a few transmitters and plotting the angle on a map, you can triangulate where you are. Nifty, but I really would like to know how often this was used in actual practice, you know, not just as a demo. Update on the hinge up the front portion. Apparently the solution is brute force. So yes, it does work, but only if the case is in a stable state. And that's it. A vintage radio receiver brushed up to look and work as good as possible. Some minor tweaking is still required, yes. I'll be making a follow-up video when I get around to do it. Which might take quite a while when I look at my backlog. Anyhow, I hope you enjoyed this consumer electronic episode. See you next time! I am aiming for the tuning string to go on first, so all related components are first. Everything is first. Nope.